Director of Renee Kassan, the Jewish Voice for Human Rights. We work to promote and protect universal rights within the UK by drawing on Jewish teachings, values, historical experiences, and by catalyzing the British Jewish community's engagement with fundamental human rights and freedom. We do this through a combination of advocacy and knowledge-based skills and empowerment. While we're a UK-based campaigning organization, and we only lobby on policy change in the UK, as a Jewish human rights organization, we have been very mindful of our role since October 7th, 2023, to help our supporter base and the wider UK community understand the complex international legal framework that applies to the events of the 7th and since. And that's why in February of last year, we launched this initiative, this international legal series, to provide in-depth legal analysis of the complex international legal issues that apply to the conflict and provide a platform for expert voices. Since the launch, we've had 5 sessions, and those are all available on Renee Kassan's YouTube channel. Tonight, we explore the intersection of artificial intelligence, AI, human rights, and conflict, an area that it is rapidly evolving and is increasingly important. AI is no longer a distant or abstract concept. It is now embedded in every fabric of modern warfare, surveillance, and decision-making. From autonomous weapons to predictive analytics, AI technologies are shaping how conflicts are fought and how civilians are protected or exposed. If you take the UK and the Ukraine-Russia war, for example, Ukrainian forces have increasingly relied on autonomous and semi-autonomous drones for both reconnaissance and precision strikes. These drones often operate with minimal human input, using AI to navigate, identify targets, and execute attacks. The war in Ukraine and the conflict in Gaza, just to name these two, have intensified global discussions about the ethics and legal implications of autonomous weapons, including issues of accountability and potential violations of international law. What happens to human dignity when machines are used to assess risk, assign blame, or even target individuals? So tonight's conversation is not just about technology. It's about values, it's about ethics, and it's the future of humanity in the age of intelligent machines. So I'm therefore delighted to introduce our speaker for this evening, Dr. Tal Mimran. Tal teaches law and technology at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem and serves as a faculty member at Zefat Academic College. Tal consults policymakers, tech companies, and UN agencies on the intersection between law and technology, and he participates in international working groups, like NATO, for example. Tal also directs a program on digital human rights and is a senior fellow in Tachlit, the Institute for Israeli Public Policy, a think and do tank. I really like that definition. So Tal will speak for about 35 minutes, more give or take, and then we will open it up to questions. I will ask that while Tal does his presentation that you remain muted, and then you'll be able to share your questions either in person or in writing. And just so everyone realizes, this event is recorded, as this will be part of our recorded series. So Tal, without any further ado, I'm going to ask you to unmute, and I'm going to spotlight you. And yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mia. Thank you for the invitation. I'm delighted to join you today and to contribute to the important work of the organization and discussion in your community. It is lovely to meet you all and also see some familiar faces, specifically dear Noah. Good to see you. Today, we will discuss the very specific case study of the use of AI by the IDF in the Israel-Hamas war, but I believe that it is always better to start a discussion from a broad perspective and to zoom in as we move along. So I will do that, and I hope that you will enjoy my choice. So, as a starting point, the triangle or the relationship between humans, technology, and security has accompanied us from time immemorial. Technology has always been an important pillar of both law enforcement and also warfare since the days of sticks and stones. And we can remember, for example, historical developments on the role of technology, be it in the UK with the establishment of the Scotland Yard in 1829, with its scientific approach to law enforcement. And of course, as mentioned by Mia, we've seen the role of technology in warfare, most notably recently in Russia and Ukraine and in Israel. Now, this relationship between humans and technology has been very evident in Israeli society. Israel is commonly referred to as the startup nation, and the Israeli society is characterized as a society in which at least most parts of it or most groups of it are interested in pursuing innovation and finding ways in developing technology that will be at the service of humanity and will serve as a catalyst both for the economy of the state, but more importantly, for the betterment of our lives in here. Now, the relationship between the Israeli society and technology is not a coincidental one. It was a strategic choice that was taken already back in the 1950s out of the desire of Israel to create a sense of independence, both on the military level and also on the economic level. This decision was made against the backdrop of a boycott against, against Israel by its main weapon supplier back then, which was France. Now, since then, the decision to put technology at the heart of Israeli society and development proved itself as a very strong decision in the sense that we saw a technological community, an industry which strives in Israel in a very unique fashion. And I think that not many states can proud themselves of having both the most advanced offensive cyber tools while hosting the best cyber defense companies, and specifically the one which invented the firewall, which is the symbol of cybersecurity, which is, of course, a checkpoint. Now, this reliance on technology in Israeli society did not bypass the army. It was the opposite is true. The army and the military industry are in fact a main pillar in the technological industry in Israel. And one of the very first technological industries that was established in Israel was a military industry that later became the parent company of the more known industries today, like Rafael and the aerial industry in Israel. Now, the IDF indeed has pursued, specifically since 2015, a vision of a small army, small and smart army that will rely on technology and will minimize the harm to human beings while improving the security of the state. Of course, this vision crashed in the face of reality on October 7, which has since then become by far the most significant military event in Israeli modern life, in a war that began in Gaza but later developed into various different fronts, including Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and even reaching Iran recently. Now, this war is also presenting for Israel the most significant legal challenge that we've seen thus far, with 3 different proceedings in the International Court of Justice dealing with Israel in the last 2 years, with an ongoing saga with the International Criminal Court, with a rise or rise again of the threat of universal jurisdiction proceedings against Israeli soldiers, and of course with initiatives that focus on economic boycotts and limitations of military export towards Israel. And lest we forget that above all, this period of time in Israel and in the Middle East is also one of the most tragic ones on the humane level. In Israel, we saw tens of thousands of people that were injured, thousands of people that died, communities which are still shaken and trying to deal with the suffering that was caused by the war. And of course, we're still waiting for the last 50 hostages that are still in Gaza. And at the same time, Palestinians in the Gaza Strip are facing devastation and destruction like never before. And we are seeing tragic scenes from Gaza. And we are all in the midst of a very hard and tragic situation, which we must find a way to work together to create a better future for all of us in the Middle East. Now, against all of this backdrop, we are zooming in on the issue of the use of artificial intelligence in the Israel-Hamas war, which has become the perfect storm. It has become the perfect storm in the sense that this is the best moment in time to introduce AI into the battlefield, because we are, in fact, in the beginning of the era of AI on a more broader level. So as we all know, as I saw that some of your activities thus far also already dealt with, artificial intelligence is by far the story of our time, and it promises to change our societies, economies, and everyone's life. The roots of artificial intelligence are quite ancient. We can begin with cognitive thinking and philosophy in ancient Greece and Rome, and we can look at more modern developments, for example, the work of scientists like Charles Babbage in the UK and his assistant, Ada Lovelace, back in 1822. Ida is considered as the first ever female computer scientist in the world, even before we had computers. And she was the first to envision the role of artificial intelligence in the creation of art and music, something that was beyond the reach of the masculine computer scientists that dominated the time. And of course, we cannot look at the history of artificial intelligence while neglecting the role of the father of modern artificial intelligence, Alan Turing, also from the UK. So as we can see, I am delighted to talk with probably one of the most important nations, if not the most important nation, for the development of modern AI as we know it. Now, while humanity has been waiting and envisioning the role of AI in our societies, as we saw in the writings of authors like Isaac Asimov, and as we saw in classical cinematic works like Space Odyssey from 1968 from Stanley Kubrick, humanity has been waiting for this moment. We've been waiting impatiently for this moment, but sadly, as often happens, we did not really prepare as a society and also as individuals for the impact of this technology on our life. And there are many challenges that are created given the widespread introduction of artificial intelligence in all fields of life. I will mention just 4 main challenges which are relevant to our context, and then I will move on to discuss the specific use of AI by the IDF. So one primary challenge is, of course, the issue of algorithmic bias, namely the existence of biases in the algorithmic decision-making processes that are promoted by AI applications, which impact many fields in our life, like employment, as we saw in Amazon, or criminal proceedings, as we saw in the US with the Compass system. The second challenge is that of over-reliance on artificial intelligence, in the sense that we will replace human intelligence with artificial intelligence, and we will avoid using our own cognitive processes in order to reach decisions which have great impact on people's life. We saw that problem in Israel with a profiling automation system that was used in the borders of Israel. So since 2015, there has been a system that basically takes the logic of profiling and automates it based on AI, in a way that advises police officers who to stop and frisk at the entry to the state of Israel at the airport. And this system has proven itself as problematic in the sense of taking over the discretion and consideration of the officers themselves. The third challenge is that of the black box or the lack of explainabilities. So while we know what input we put inside AI applications and what output comes out of them, there is a blank spot, a black box in between, which we don't always understand what is going on inside it. And this is problematic in a reality in which, in technological or technical terms, currently we have a trade-off between effectiveness of the system and between its ability to explain itself. So if I will require an AI application to explain each and every step it is taking to make sure that we will be in control of all, the entire process, then we will lose the most promising aspect of AI, which is its effectiveness and accuracy. And finally, the fourth challenge, which is of most relevance to the IDF, is the fact that we are currently in a world which mostly lacks regulation for the issue of AI and specifically the role of AI in military operations. So even initiatives that we are seeing, like the AI Act in the EU, and like principles that are developed in states like the UK, Singapore, Israel, and others, we are seeing the focus on the role of regulation when it comes to AI, for example, in providing governmental services, but there is usually an exception and an exclusion to the role of regulation when it comes to law enforcement and also to warfare. Now, the reason that we are in this legal void is that the international community is in one of its most polarized moments, and states are not only carrying different interests, they are also experiencing different perspectives on the role of international law on our lives. And we can see, for example, states like Israel, the UK, and the US, which are very satisfied with the current situation because they are at the top of the development on the technological level, and they feel that they have the ability to impact the discussion over any political regulation of developments, while other states like Iran, Russia, and China feel marginalized and want to promote new systems of law that will create a world which, in their view, will be more inclusive and will not lead to a situation in which, as those states believe, the West will be monopolizing technology in order to harness and promote its own technopolitical power and hegemony. Now, those four challenges are of tremendous relevance to the discussion of AI in the IDF. And after this opening statements which I made, now it's time to reach the main course and discuss the actual applications of AI in the IDF. With your permission, I will take a sip of coffee to savor this moment. I think it was Oscar Wilde that said that he wakes up every morning torn between the desire to save the world and to savor it. So I think that we can feel the echoing of this sentence during our presentation and given the topic that we deal with. Okay, so the IDF indeed has been relying extensively on technology since the outset. But in recent years, there has been a very clear trend of introducing AI applications in all aspects of operation of the IDF. And we are seeing it on the defensive level, on the command and control level, and also on the offensive level. So on the defensive level, we are seeing AI applications which improve the pride and glory of the Israeli military industry, which is, of course, the air defense systems, such as Iron Dome, David Slings, and others. And in addition, we are seeing AI applications which also help to safeguard armored vehicles within the Gaza Strip, such as Edge 360, which is a sensor-to-shooter system which both recognizes threats and also gives advice on possible responses. in the face of this threat. So we have various defensive applications which rely on AI, and we will growingly see more and more of that. In addition, we have the second level, which is that of command and control. And we are seeing AI applications which are trying to help the military commander of the IDF, first, to collect information, second, to analyze it, and third, also to deliver it and transfer it between different units in order to maintain a common understanding of the reality on the ground. And we have seen various systems which try to promote this effort, like the Alchemist system, or like the new AI agent, which the IDF introduced to some of its commanders very recently. Thirdly, the last level of AI applications is, of course, the offensive one. Now, on the offensive level, we have different applications of AI. So one main example is munitions, which rely on AI applications for their improvement. For example, the Spike LR missile that was developed by Rafael. Secondly, we are seeing AI applications which come in the aid of, as mentioned by Mia, the deployment of drones and operation of drones in the battlefield. So, for example, a system like Legion X that allows the control of various unmanned vehicles at the same time, that was developed by Elbit. And thirdly, and this has been the most controversial aspect of this development, we are seeing the growing use of decision support systems which are trying to help the military commander of the IDF to make a better decision in the battlefield, and specifically in the context of targeting either objects or human beings. Now, this development did not go unnoticed by the international community, most notably given the fact that Israel is actually going against the mainstream at the moment, in the sense that the first time that Israel came out to the light and recognized the use of AI in the battlefield was in May 2023. And symbolically, also on May 2023, it was the first time that the international community gathered to a session, to a multi-stakeholder event, which is called RE-AIM, Responsible AI in the Military Domain, which is an initiative that is promoted by the Netherlands and South Korea, and by today is joined by almost 150 states, which joined a discussion alongside academia, civil society, and industry on the appropriate way to move ahead with the integration of AI in the battlefield. But of course, the approach in this initiative is a very prudent one. While in Israel, we are seeing the IDF really rushing ahead and trying to find every possible way to to harness the technology for the improvement of its ability to reach its military goals. And as such, we have seen significant criticism. We have seen significant criticism against Israel, and the harshest one yet was actually by an Israeli media outlet called the 972 Plus or Local Call, which accused Israel of promoting a mass assassination factory by algorithm. Now, I will admit that the AI systems are a game changer in the sense of the way that the IDF can deploy its operations, and they are definitely impacting the battlefield as we know it, starting from yesterday. But at the same time, I think that this allegation is far-reaching and inaccurate, and I will try to explain why, while recognizing the fact that we need to deal with the challenges that AI presents us as we move ahead. So first, the challenges which I mentioned are highly relevant to I will focus on the decision support systems as they are the heart of the controversy of the issue. And I will mention how the challenges which I mentioned earlier are manifested in their context. So algorithmic bias is a real risk or concern when it comes to decision support systems, but at the same time, when it comes to the process of targeting, of military targeting, the idea is to recognize or to differentiate between friend and foe, or between a civilian and a combatant. rather than the idea of prioritizing a certain person or group over other people within society. So in my view, algorithmic bias is less relevant to those decision support systems because of the context, but the other challenges of over-reliance and the black box or lack of explainability are definitely relevant to the context of the IDF. And when it comes to over-reliance, we need to make sure that the use of those systems is supporting human intelligence and human discretion and not used in a way that will replace them. And the IDF must make sure that it is creating protocols that verify that human beings at the end of the day are at the heart of the process and most importantly are at the end of the process. And in addition, I also recognize the fact that the lack of
Welcome to the all-new High.
Okay, I got muted somehow, I don't know. So I will also recognize that that another challenge which is highly relevant to the IDF is the black box problem or the lack of explainability, because while the IDF maintains that the military commander is able to understand the data which led to the device of the system and the process in which it reached its conclusion, we are not aware if there are any blind spots that will come in the way of the ability of the IDF to investigate itself, be that on the military practical level or be that on the legal level. So the issue of over-reliance and lack of explainability are highly relevant, and the IDF must make sure that it is conscious of those concerns and it must monitor the way in which it introduces the system in order to avoid falling into those two pits. But at the same time, I wish to highlight some points which are usually left out of the discussion when it comes to Israel, ethics, and the use of AI in the battlefield. So first, we need to remember that this is, at the end of the day, a pilot. This is a process which is taking place in some of the target rooms and some of the decision support processes in the IDF, but not in all of them. So just to illustrate, in the IDF, we have around 20 target rooms in which decisions in relation to strikes are being made. So you have 4 main target rooms, one for each main command, Southern, Central, and Northern Command. And you also have 1 main target room in the Air Force. And other than that, you have target rooms which are getting closer and closer to the battlefield itself. And they usually include more tactical decisions than strategic ones. Now, the introduction of those systems, the introduction of AI systems is not full-fledged. Namely, those systems are not used in all of the target rooms of the IDF. In fact, they are only used thus far in 4 of the 20 target rooms. So we are talking about a small portion of the systems which are actually involved in the decision support in the decision-making process. Secondly, the process in which those systems are introduced is a way that supports the intelligence gathering process, which is the first step in the life cycle of a target. And at the end of the day, the output of the system or the recommendation of a target goes through a target room in which you have a group of experts, which include a munitions expert, a legal advisor, a humanitarian expert, an intelligence expert, of course, which all work together in order to evaluate the possible targets and in order to make sure that we're meeting all legal, ethical, and moral considerations once we decide to deploy an attack. Thirdly, we are still in a situation in which the fog of war is very significant. The data that comes out of Gaza is limited. We have a war of narratives between Israel and Hamas and between third parties which are involved in the discussion. We have more question marks than exclamation marks. And I think that we need to wait for the fog of war to disperse in the sense that we will be able to understand which attacks or which targets during the war were attacked while using AI and which were not, in order to better understand the role of AI and the possible impact of AI in terms of accuracy, in terms of humanitarian impact. Now, in this regard, I'm not trying to act innocent. Those systems, as I mentioned earlier, are a game changer. They're a game changer in one main aspect, which we must recognize, and this is the aspect of the speed or swiftness of the ability to create possible targets, and as a result, the volume of the firepower which is being deployed. So if in the past, a team of intelligence officers had to work for a long time, say around 200 days, in order to create a bank of targets that would include between 100 and 150 targets. Today, you can use AI applications and reach the same result within a period of a day to a week. So we are definitely in a new reality in which the IDF is facing a situation in which it does have an endless bank of targets to operate on. But at the end of the day, we need to recall that the decision whether to strike and what to strike and to which extent to strike is derived from a strategic decision of the army, namely the strategic goal of the war. And the technology at the end of the day is in the service of promoting those goals. So once the IDF is operating with the goal of complete destruction of Hamas, then the technology will never be the reason for the way in which this goal is achieved. The technology is only a means in the service of this goal. And indeed, we can note that the majority of destruction in Gaza, at least in the recent months, has been done with D9 bulldozers more than with airplanes. And in this regard, it is obvious that this destruction is happening based on a strategic decision of the IDF, and the technology is not a trigger of the extent of destruction. Rather, it is the strategic goal which is trying to be pursued by Israel and by the IDF. And until we will have the data and until we will be able to better comprehend the real impact in terms of quality, not only quantity, on decision-making processes when it comes to AI system, I believe that we need to avoid a glorification of human decision-making and demonization of the machine. Because at the end of the day, we human beings have proved time and again that we are more than capable to do to take extremely violent courses and to commit international crimes with or without the technology. And we got a reminder of that in Israel in October 7. So in my view, we need to be cautious about trying to reach a binary or a very strong opinion on the matter, so long as we are unable to actually discuss the data and understand the context and the situation on the ground. And I will mention that thus far, the majority of the mistakes or tragedies that we saw in Gaza in the context of targeting were actually attacks that did not involve at all a targeting room. So, for example, the bombing of the Jabalia refugee camp, or the bombing that led to the death of the World Central Kitchen employees in Gaza, were attacks that did not go through the target rooms. Rather, there were attacks that derived from a desire of a commander on the ground to receive air support. So in my view, we need to be cautious and not conclusory, and we need to try and evaluate to the best ability that we have based on the data that is in front of us. But still, to conclude, we still need to do something. We still need to understand what is our best path ahead, notwithstanding the challenges which were mentioned and notwithstanding the regulatory challenge that we are facing. So in my view, first, it is important to use what we have in the sense of mechanisms that limit the misuse of power and technology as a form of power through mechanisms like export control, through mechanisms like privacy by design, and other mechanisms which are prescribed by domestic law depending on the state. Secondly, we need to find a way to creatively interpret the law in a way that will fit this new reality. So, for example, I assert that there is a need to maintain a human agent in the decision-making process, because the standard that international humanitarian law prescribes in terms of standard of behavior is the standard of the reasonable military commander. So long as we have the standard of the military reasonable commander and not the reasonable algorithmic or military algorithm, we need to make sure that we have a human in the loop, and we need to make sure that we're meeting the existing standards. And we can also take other principles under international law and try to find a way to suit the legal void that we are facing. For example, a principle like due diligence, which is a standard of behavior when it comes to international responsibility in the face of crimes. Thirdly, we need to complement the existing regimes with new ones. Most notably, there is a need to create regulatory or supervisory processes in earlier stages of development of technology. Most of the regimes that we have today, most notably export control regimes, are regimes of supervision that is applied at the end of the development of technology. And once we are at the end of the process, and after millions and sometimes billions of dollars are impacted by the process of the creation of the technology, it is harder and harder to change the technology and to make a decision that will lead to sunk cost of the company at the end of the line. And as such, we need to think of processes that create supervision in earlier stages, and also processes that will create a sense of partnership between the private industry and between the state. Because at the end of the day, a main engine, as is also evident in Israel, you saw, I mentioned Rafael, Elbit, and other companies. So indeed, the private industry is a main engine, and there needs to be a common sense of responsibility and partnership between the state and the industry. And finally, while we are in a very dire situation in terms of international relations, state must still find a way to rise above narrow interest and to work together and find a way to move ahead to a better future rather than to wake up to a reality of a race to the bottom, which will end as envisioned by the very smart person in my background, which stated, Albert Einstein, of course, that mentioned that he doesn't know what will be, how will be the Third World War, how it will be fought, but he knows that the Fourth World War will be fought with sticks and stones. So before we revert back to those earlier days from which I began my presentation, let's make sure that we look ahead, and let's make sure that we find common ground, common paths, and common values, universal values, that can help us to make better decisions and make a better world for tomorrow. So thank you very much. This is my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any hear any comment or answer any question. Thank you.
Wow, Tal, you took us through a whirlwind of technology and machines, and brilliant, really. Thank you so much. I see there's already a question in our chat box. I'm going to invite Sheldon actually to ask this question. Sheldon is a trustee of Renecasan. So Sheldon, do you want to maybe unmute yourself and ask the question?
Can you hear me?
Just about.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good. Tal, I thought that was a very, very helpful, succinct, and clear presentation. I have two questions. The first is, how does the use of AI impact the reasonable commander test? And secondly, do you think there's a case post-war for an independent commission to examine the conduct of the war, not only strategically, and there are, of course, questions about that, but in terms of legally, which might help protect us against the action from the ICC. I appreciate Israel's not ready for either of those, but I would be interested in your answer to that second question, and of course the first.
Thank you. Thank you, Sheldon. Thank you very much, and lovely to meet you. First, I think that AI will change everything, also in respect to the legal standards of behavior that we are used to apply. Because at the end of the day, the meaning of the standard of the reasonable military commander is the standard as follows. A military commander is required to make the best decision based on the information which is present before it. So when we examine the reasonableness of the act of the military commander, we try to evaluate what type of information was before him or her. And in this regard, when you use AI applications which limit the purview, they limit the extent of knowledge which the military commander can consider, so it leads to a situation in which we are actually going against the principle rather than trying to accommodate the technology in a way that will meet it. So in this regard, AI is really disruptive, is really breaking the rules and blurring the lines of the legal standards that we were able to apply in the past. And as such, we need to find a way. There is a principle in international law which is called ex factis jus oritor. Namely, the law cannot be detached from reality in a way that will lead to the lack of meaningless of the law in reality. So it is a balance, it is a dance between reality and the law. So the law needs to move towards reality, and reality needs to move towards the law. And it is a mutual and reciprocal process which can only lead to a positive outcome. And so long as there will be no intention or desire to try and push both sides, the legal standards and the developments in reality towards one another, we will find ourselves in a very meaningful disparity. And you indeed raise one of the most significant challenges in the regulatory level. Your second question raises another significant challenge, which is not focused on technology, but is highly relevant to Israel and warfare, and that's the issue of investigations. Now, Israel traditionally has been very cautious when it comes to accepting the jurisdiction and authority of international institutions, and Israel usually very strongly try to push towards an understanding that it possesses by itself the systems which are required to investigate both on the military and both on the legal level the conduct of the IDF. Now, we had some challenges in the past in this regard, in terms of for example, the willingness of Israel to work together with commissions of inquiry that were established to investigate previous wars in Israel. We saw this tension between Israel and international institutions like the ICC and ICJ, and we are seeing this tension between Israel and other states that try to allow for some jurisdiction in relation to the activities of the IDF, most notably in the context of universal jurisdiction. Now, this was the regular challenge we lived with for decades. But in the last 2 years, the situation exacerbated in various levels. First, the hostility between Israel and international institutions is unprecedented, and the lack of trust and the lack of willingness to work together has reached a level that even the most pessimist of us were unable to envision until a few years ago. Secondly, Israel is still recovering from the domestic drama of the legal reform, which really divided the nation during the last 2 years, and which some even attribute or attach or create a connection between this this social unrest and the decision of Hamas to use this moment of volatility in Israeli society and attack us when we are not ready, because we're too focused on arguing in between ourselves. And indeed, since the legal reform and the backlash that was, again, unprecedented in terms of millions of people marching the streets for dozens of weeks across the state, the treatment in Israel towards the law, towards agents of the law, and towards the issue of investigation has become highly politicized. And very sadly, while I completely agree with you that a domestic investigation is required, first and foremost, because it is our duty under the law and based on the morale that we want to attribute to our society. And secondly, it is important to deflect or to deal with international institutions that want to exercise their jurisdiction against Israelis or against the Israeli state apparatus. And while those investigations are needed, sadly, I feel that we are currently in a situation in which our society is not built or equipped for that. There are too many domestic issues that need to be resolved on the political and social level, and there is a rebuilding of trust that needs to be done in the relation between Israel and international institutions. So this is a very dire answer, but it is a realistic one. I'm obligated to present to you the truth as I understand it. So I would have loved to present a more positive or optimistic approach, but sadly, I think that we are going through a path that will only distance us from the ability as a society to properly investigate and specifically to investigate in a way that will lead to better international cooperation with institutions. And we can think of other states that were also under ICC investigation, like Colombia, that chose to engage in a dialogue with the ICC prosecutor and that were able, through a very long dialogue of 10 years, to reach a situation in which, at the end of the day, no Colombian was prosecuted in the ICC. At the end of the day, the ICC respected the processes that Colombia went through, processes that included legislation, prosecution, establishment of truth and justice committees. And at the end of the day, Colombia gained the trust of international institutions that wanted to move away. Now, at the same time, I must say, of course, I'm not neglecting the fact that Israel does receive a treatment which is at times a bit different than other states in the world, in the sense of criticism, in the sense of the lack of trust toward Israeli institutions. So I'm not placing all of the blame on the Israeli government and society. We are also dealing with a very harsh climate in terms of the treatment that Israel is facing when it comes to international institutions. But currently, I believe that one needs to focus on the things that one can improve. And the things that I can improve are the ones which I live through, and I need to focus on the society which I am part of. So that's why that's the reason from my perspective. So I hope that it answers your questions.
Yes, I'm afraid it does. Yeah.
Thank you, Tal. There was another question which I'm gonna in the chat, and I'm guessing the context of AI, because that's the topic of discussion. What measures does the IDF take to ensure that innocent Palestinian civilians don't get caught in the crossfire, so to speak?
Yes. So it is common knowledge that the IDF is doing a lot in order to avoid the harm to uninvolved civilians, and it goes through a very significant branch of military advice in the IDF. There are all over than 400 legal advisors, which are located in different parts of the chain of command of the IDF, and which advise both commanders at headquarters and also units on the ground on specific decisions. In addition, of course, Israel is using various means to try and avoid harm to uninvolved civilians, including knock on the roof, leaflets, telephone calls, and etc., etc. But we are here to talk about technology, right? So let's focus on the technology. So first and foremost, I think that the technology, and specifically AI, when it comes to command and control, gives the army a much better option to avoid harm to uninvolved civilians while relying on that technology. And I will explain from a practical perspective, because 10 years ago, I used to serve in reserve duty as a legal advisor in the IDF. I used to sit in the headquarters of the commander of the Southern Command, and I used to give advice on general policy issues and specifically on targeting. And I used to see the effort of trying to recognize first and foremost uninvolved civilians under the fog of war, but secondly, trying to move a very big and strong army in a very small territory without ending up like an elephant in a china shop. So the ability to understand what's going on in the territory in Gaza, and the ability to understand where is the population, the uninvolved civilians on the ground, and the ability to understand where do we have sensitive sites, for example, that we need to avoid targeting, is a very significant, altogether are significant pillars in the ability of the IDF to avoid harm to uninvolved civilians. So in the past, 10 years ago, we used to have meetings every 6 hours that we look together on the maps, and we try to locate sensitive sites, and we try to update the forces on the ground. And it is very complicated to command and control the process of information, first which is in a state of a flux because there is endless information, but secondly, with so many moving parts and so many changes, which sometimes occur on an hourly basis and sometimes on a much shorter basis. But when you can rely on technology, when you can have a screen in each tank in which a commander can look at a map, which is being updated live, and which shows you, which can give you an alert if you are nearing or coming close to a sensitive site. So technology can help you quite a lot to make sure that you are more in control of the situation. And we know that today, for example, Israel is really managing a map, an interactive map that all of the time is aware all of the time of the concentration of population within the Gaza Strip, even that this is a very dynamic issue. In addition, technology can also be in the service of less harm to civilians, because we can even take offensive technology, say spywares, and before you want to strike a person, if you can use a spyware to take over his or her phone and to open the camera and to see if your target is alone or with his or her family, then you can avoid damage to the family or harm to the family by using the technology. So at the end of the day, technology is neutral. Technology is in the service of our values. And we can always decide on the way in which we want to harness and use the technology. And even technology that we think that has a certain purpose, offensive one, can at the end of the day also promote other purposes, and specifically defensive ones.
Thank you, Tal. We now have a surge of questions. Jonathan, I see Jonathan Gibson. I see you've got your hand up. If you want to ask your question, and then we'll take the other two in the chat and close it with those questions, because
Sure.
we're running out of time. So Jonathan, yes.
Sure. Yeah, thank you so much for the talk. So I'm a tech reporter starting at the Dispatch in DC. And I wanted to know, in terms of, you mentioned human in the loop, a lot of people you seem to be using this word, and it's become very popular, whether it's in business, whether it's at Wimbledon, whatever. What, though, does it meaningfully mean in a sense? Because there's always going to be risks of simply deferring to it, but then there's also maybe risks of kind of you implement your own human biases on top of it to just exacerbate the problem. And further to that, in terms of training the soldiers who are using these technologies, the fact that they're far away potentially makes it even more dehumanizing in terms of realizing what you're doing. It feels much more video game like. What sort of training processes and kind of are currently in place or should be in place for people involved?
So I absolutely agree. And we saw the problem of dehumanization of the targets also in the context of drones. And we saw the difference between pilots which are actually flying to the area of the warfare, and drone operators which are staying at the air-conditioned office back home. And on the one hand, this definitely can lead to dehumanization of your target, but on the other hand, we saw, for example, in terms of post-trauma and psychological effects on the pilot itself, we actually saw that PTSD was also common for drone operators. So in this regard, the heart was still involved in the process. So there is still hope in this regard. And as per your first question, can you clarify because it was more of a
Yeah,
statement.
sure.
So
Like what does meaningful human in the loop actually look like?
Okay, perfect. So in the literature, we're usually differentiate between the three types of human involvement: human in the loop, human on the loop, and human outside of the loop. So a human in the loop is an integral part of the decision making process. A human off the loop is a situation which is fully automated, and a human above the loop or out above the loop is a human which exercises oversight, but usually on a retroactive fashion. Now, in my view, we need to choose the most strict or stringent option, which is, of course, human in the loop. So long as there is no benchmark, so long as we don't have a clear understanding on what is required, we need to require the most of the armies. And in this regard, we need to require that human beings are part of the process from A to Z. Now, if we look at the IDF, so the life cycle of a target begins with investigation and drafting of a possible target in the intelligence corps, and then the target moves to the target room. We have a discussion of the experts, and then we have a decision, and the target moves to the Air Force or to the units themselves, which perform the attack. Now, the weakest link in this chain is definitely the intelligence gathering phase. And indeed, those systems, the AI decision support systems, are focused on the intelligence gathering phase. And the most concerning the testimonies that we heard in relation to the deployment of the targets was indeed by some intelligence officers which allegedly claimed that they themselves felt detached from the process and from the human cost of their results and of the result of their decisions. Now, I completely agree with you that this is the weakest link and we need to focus on it. And in this regard, the most important thing that the IDF needs to do is to create protocols for intelligence work. So protocols for intelligence work which involves AI, and which makes sure that the intelligence officers are not neglecting their duties, which are first and foremost, before their professional duty as an intelligence officer, they have a moral duty to be a human agent, to be an agent in the service of the values of the society, which everyone are prescribed to protect. So it definitely requires from the IDF to make sure that we have clear protocols for decisions making processes, but also training, like you mentioned. And the training must be multi-level in the sense that the training needs to be legal, and today there is legal training, but it also needs to be technical, so the person will be will fully comprehend the abilities and also the weaknesses of the system that it uses. And thirdly, of course, we need ethical and moral training alongside it. So military training cannot be what it used to be. It needs to be more than that. So military training began as something which was completely professional. In recent years, we added the second or next level of the law. Now we need to add the technology and the ethics to complement this suit. So thank you very much. It's a very meaningful question. And of course, if you want to continue the dialogue, I'm happy to do so. So lovely to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tal. We're running out of time, so if people are happy to stay on just for a few more minutes. There are two questions, very specific. I wonder whether you're even able to answer. One about the specific targeting of specific individual, and the second one about, and the other one on help of AI in locating the hostages, the 50 still held in Gaza?
Yeah, definitely. The technology is a big part of the effort of locating, maintaining information, and saving the hostages, without a doubt. Mostly in terms of analysis of endless quantities of information of various kinds, audio, video, text, and etc. and etc. So AI is very crucial in trying to make sense of a very complex situation. And indeed, it does have a role, but the use of AI is not integral. The use of AI for the purpose of locating and saving hostages, in my view, or the best of my understanding, was not institutionalized. It is not part of the system as the other systems which I mentioned, like the gospel and etc. Rather, it is used by people which are involved in either the headquarters or volunteers or trying to help. So people are using their knowledge, people are using the technology they have access to, but there is no institutional response in this regard, and there should have been, without a doubt. And as for the targeting of Marwan, I actually only a few days ago, I had another concrete question by a journalist from Germany, which was in relation to a target that was a journalist in Gaza, not a medic. And I can say to you what I said in the context of the other conversation, which is we cannot know. We cannot know because the targeting of a person can first, it can be based on the decision in one of the 20 target rooms, and only 4 of them have access to AI applications. And in addition, lots of the targeting are taking place without the target room. Once you have soldiers on the ground, once you have units on the ground, you have less need to use AI systems, because you have people that have eyes and have senses, and they can recognize by themselves the targets. And when it comes to the legality of this target, then the law is the law, and the standard will always be the same. Israel will always need to be able to show that there was a military need for the attack. Israel will always need to show that it took precautions, that it made sure that the harm will not be disproportionate, and of course that no specific other protections were violated, like protection of sites, like hospitals, like religious sites, and etc. But we need to look deep into the circumstances and the context of each and every operation in order to understand if indeed there is a concern of illegality. And of course, for me, every life is a world and beyond, and every situation needs to be investigated thoroughly. And it will be up to Israel to make a case. And I believe that the IDF and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Ministry of Justice and all people involved will do everything they can in order to first find the truth, because we care first about the truth, not about explaining our actions. And secondly, we'll do the best to make sure that Israel will be able to make sure that it will be a flourishing partner in the international community. And 15 years ago, I used to work in the Ministry of Justice. I was part of the team that wrote a response to the Goldstone report. And I know how hard people are working on those efforts. And what I did back then on the Goldstone report, it was preparation. It was elementary school, because today it is a brave new reality, and people are in line for many people are in line for very meaningful and important work, and I'm sure that they will do it to the best they can.
Tal, your presentation and answering the questions has been absolutely brilliant, especially considering the fact that it's 10 p.m. now in Israel. So I appreciate it even more. And I'm sure our participants join my sincere thanks. Thank you everyone for joining us this evening. We will post now in our chat the link to our YouTube channel that has previous recordings of other sessions in this series, if it's about the hostages or explaining the ICC and ICJ. So please have a look at that. And getting Tal on screen, even though it's just on screen and two-dimensional, requires investment. So please
Thank you.
consider donating to Renee Kassan. Become a friend in all ways of Renee Kassan. The link is in our chat as well. I wish everyone a lovely evening, a good summer. And I look forward to seeing you at Renee Kassan's upcoming events starting autumn when school starts. So